What up, everybody? BMF Season 3, Episode 6. After leaving Lil Milt's funeral, the kid who was killed in the Techwood shootout attempted to plant a seed of division between Claude and Remi. Meech then talked to Duffy at Rip's repast. Meech used the analogy from the Thor comic book about his brother Loki always wanted the throne, and that the number 2 always wants to be the number 1. Coincidentally for Claude, wanted that top spot cost him his life. And in this season of BMF, every leader has lost their number 2 so far except for Meech, with Duffy being his number 2, as the last remaining. Because in addition to Claude getting killed by Remi for betraying him, we also saw Tyson, Henry's number 2, getting taken out when he was beaten to death by Bryant. And we saw Glock lose his number 2, Chaka, after he sent him to do a hit on Meech before leaving Miami. But it went wrong, and Chaka was thrown out the window. We then saw Glock taken out in episode 9, caught in the crossfire, and gunned down by his own men. But Glock was the source of his own demise because of the fact he kept pursuing war against Meech. Chaka was killed by Meech in self-defense, and Glock was killed showing up at the resort Meech and T was staying at, looking to take them out. So both Chaka and Glock came looking for problems, and they both got what they were looking for, as they both left in body bags. But at the end of episode 9, T's right-hand man, Hoop, was also taken out by Henry in retaliation for what she thought was BMF taking out her cousin, Tyson. But now that Henry, Remi, and T have all lost their number 2s respectfully, they will now only be more vulnerable, and could be next like we saw with Glock. Either though we know T survives, of course, but he will definitely also be more exposed when he gets back to Detroit, with Hoop no longer being around. With Hoop gone and his childhood friend Diz, we can see T being forced to rely on Markeisha more, and also relying on Sterling Black, who we haven't seen around for a couple of episodes. Keep it in mind that Sterling does rock with Meech, but it does seem like he also questions T. Keep it in mind that Meech had the PAs take out Saint for T, and Sterling watched T take the credit for the hit. Could it also be that Sterling's hitter Cuts ended up snitching, and maybe that's why Sterling hasn't been around like that also? But as for Remi, he's now with a new crew who is supposed to be the leaders of Atlanta, who have united to take back the city. And he has a guy named Sharpe who he's now working with, and it looks like Sharpe's taking the place of Claude. But the difference between Claude and Sharpe is that Sharpe already has his own crew, as Claude was just trying to take out Remi, then take over the Techwood crew in addition to uniting the gangs the same way Remi has, but to form an alliance with BMF instead of going to war with BMF. But in the same way that Meech had planted the seed with Claude at the funeral of Lil Milt, Claude's words might have gotten through to Sharpe and the other leaders. Because in episode 9, Sharpe mentioned to Remi while Claude had been talking about how Meech had that pure weight coming in. But Remi's response was simply that we're not going to let no more outsiders come into our city. Keep it in mind that Claude felt like he had the other leaders of those gangs convinced to form an alliance with Meech, except for Sharpe. But Sharpe seems like he would be interested in hearing what Meech had to say, but maybe he didn't like the way Claude was going to snake Remi. And either though I do think it was Sharpe who told Remi about the meeting because he was mentioned before the meeting, then he was also with Remi in episode 9, but there is a chance that he wasn't who told Remi about Claude's plan. I mentioned when Meech first talked to Claude at the diner that the lady who worked at the diner knew Claude personally. So she most likely also knew Remi and could have told Remi about Claude meeting up with Meech. Then Remi could have easily had somebody following Claude around after that. Keep it in mind that when Remi killed Claude, he said we're in Techwood right now. So Claude knew he had to tread lightly, but didn't even have enough sense to meet the other leaders outside of Techwood. But it could also have been as simple as Remi's lookout seeing the other leaders of those gangs pulling up to Techwood, and then they reported it back to him. So he went to see what was going on. Then when he demonstrated like that with Claude, the other leaders might have just fallen in line, especially knowing where they were, and they wanted to make it out of Techwood alive. But in episode 9, we see Remi's now working with the Red Dogs, and either though there is a chance that it could be someone else, the clues from the show point at Remi, because Sharpe told him that Duffy and Tina left for Miami in vans. And he knew that Meech was in Miami picking up that pure weight, So he thought by making the anonymous tip that he would get rid of Meech for good by getting him arrested with all that weight. And I also mentioned in another video that I think it was Remi who also tipped the Red Dogs off about the MKs in episode 8. Trying to clear the board in episode 9 by taking out Meech, but it didn't work as planned because of the safes they had installed in those vans. So now that Meech is back in Atlanta, will the other Atlanta crews decide to work with Meech instead of Remi? Meech already told Remi that it was only going to be a matter of time until everybody else sees what Claude did. This could also be a clue concerning Remi's fate, because Claude had deep loyalties to Remi and was still going to turn on him just to stop the bloodshed and to put food in his crew's mouth. These other crews, on the other hand, they don't have the same type of loyalties to Remi, and because Claude already mentioned the name Sharpe to Meech, he knows exactly who to turn to take out Remi for good. But another clue is from the conversation that I mentioned earlier to start the video between Meech and Duffy, with Meech telling Duffy that the number 2 always wants to be the number 1. Could this be foreshadowing Duffy betraying Meech to get that number 1 spot? Because we still don't know who tipped off the MKs about Meech's location in Miami. T thought it might have been Angel, but Angel was just as worried for her life as they were. The MKs also tried following Angel, but she ditched them at the dance studio. Meech felt like they probably followed them there, but if that was true, it would have been easier for them to take them out at the warehouse while they had all that weight. But if you look at it like this, who had the most to gain if the MKs took out Meech at that resort? That would have been Duffy, because if Meech and Terry was killed, that weight would have went to him, being next in command. Then keep in mind that Duffy was who was with Meech when he went to meet up with Santiago earlier in the season as well. That was supposed to be an ambush from the MKs, but Local and the Colombians took them all out. And when Glock pointed Meech in the direction of Greeny, Meech beat Greeny down, but Duffy wanted to smoke him. Could this be because he was covering his own tracks by pointing the blame in Greeny's direction? Duffy was also quick to tell Meech when Meech got back from St. Louis that Glock was the new king of Atlanta, when Meech had left things in Duffy's hands. Did Duffy help Glock get to the top? But now that Glock is dead, if Duffy is in fact a snake, he could possibly now try to betray Meech by working with Remi Ransom. Because in the episode 10 trailer, we see both Meech and Duffy in vans. This could possibly be the same vans that just got impounded in episode 9. If they are, this also means that Meech finds a way to overcome the Red Dogs and get all that weight back. But the trailer has Remi telling Meech, game over, and Meech replying, not even close. I think what could happen is that Remi and them are at a spot to take out Meech after being given the drop by Duffy. But Meech will already be a step ahead of Remi and Duffy because he's going to get Sharpe and the other Atlanta leaders to betray Remi and form an alliance with BMF instead. So as a result, Remi and Duffy will both get killed in the finale. And one more angle with Duffy I want to address before I go is the fact that he could also be a snitch. When he got arrested earlier in the season, Meech was wondering why it was taking him so long to get released, and said that Duffy was on the run and had a warrant back in Detroit. This was also before Tina set them up with fake IDs. So there's also a chance that Duffy agreed to be a CI against Meech, and that's how he was able to get released with the warrant. Because when Tina's boyfriend got released, he was who told Meech that GBI was investigating him, as well as Angel. Duffy didn't say anything. And there you have it. Leave your thoughts, theories, and predictions in the comments.